Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. This is the last episode of 2022 for those of you who are listening to this live-ish. If you're listening from the distant future, greetings. Hope we did okay for you guys. And this is an episode with one of my best friends, Matt Coffman. And what he's talking about today is the opposite of what we normally talk about, of like, oh, this is an example of somebody living their purpose. He's going to give us like all of the pitfalls along the way from internal beliefs to external phenomenon that are going to get in the way of purpose. So like what is possibly blocking us, what already blocked us, what could block us. That's the theme today. And I think it's a good theme to close out this season 4. Our next episode will be the beginning of season 5. Season 5 is going to be a little bit different. Can't tell you exactly how yet because I don't exactly know, but I do know it's going to be more fun, more funky, more personal, and involve more togetherness. So those are the little hints. Of course, we always love getting any kind of feedback, any ideas, anybody you think we should interview on this theme of 10,000 heroes, 10,000 gifts, 10,000 moments of togetherness, 10,000 acts of beauty. So, without further ado, Matt Coffman. Thank you. There's just a million things that we can't talk about, that we do talk about, that we engage with regularly. And today, I'm going to start with this and we can just go wherever, as long as we think it's going to be valuable for the people listening, most of whom we don't know. But I want to talk a little bit about what gets in the way of purpose. Because a lot of the episodes on the show are highlighting people who have found their purpose to various degrees. And it's like, oh, great. Like what we can learn from them, from their resonance, from their vibration, maybe sometimes some concrete tips. But I want to kind of flip it a little bit. Let's just start with, from your experience, in your own life or in the lives of people you're close to, what gets in the way of people really living with their purpose or living in alignment with their purpose or living in their purpose?
That's a deep one to jump right into the middle of. And it's going to be hard for me to track. If I want to give a comprehensive answer to that, we're going to have to touch on a bunch of different things.
Let's do it.
So first off, purpose implies some type of verticality, some type of hierarchy of meaning. And ideally, your highest ability to target or experience meaningfulness would be where your purpose originates, or maybe even the one just past that. So if someone has been convinced that reality is flat and that there's nothing more inherently meaningful than anything else, all the way out to someone's understanding of the creator of the universe, or is there or is not there a God or anything like that, your experience of purpose is going to be in relationship to your experience of verticality.
Okay. So our ability to access or comprehend purpose has to do with our beliefs about the world. So that we can think of those guys in The Big Lebowski, like the nihilist dudes, they're not going to have access to a lot of purpose because for them, everything is the same, like lack of meaning.
Yeah. That's like they're invested in the fact that there is actually no explanation or origin of how things are.
So they're easy to categorize. What about people who are just firmly in the rational material sense? Maybe they're atheist or agnostic, but the idea of like some sort of divine mystery is questionable or laughable or somehow allergic to them.
Yeah. So purpose is one of these concepts that is going to be heavily influenced by your frame of reference in regards to why we're here, because the question of why I'm here, you can practically hear the echo of why are we here, right? And so the why are we here answer will dictate the possibility field in which you engage with the why am I here.
Yeah. So if why we're here is just an accident, then why am I here has to be an accident, unless we're some kind of megalomaniac. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's a big piece of the puzzle for purpose and people's experience of it is the way that you experience verticality or source of meaning or cosmic, just why is all this in place? Why do these things work the way they work? Why is there a sun? Why is there an earth? Why are there seasons? Why is there time? All these things. Whatever your explanation is of that, your understanding of your personal purpose is going to be directly coming out of that. Until and unless your personal experience of purpose exceeds the current answers, at which point you try to look for bigger answers to what we're doing here, or until you actually have a direct transformational, kind of transcendent experience that elevates you to another level of understanding of what's going on in the cosmos.
Yeah. So like the experience you allow yourself has to come out of or fit into your belief system, unless you happen to have an experience so profound that it requires you to shatter your existing belief system.
Yeah, and they interact. So you can have an experience that shatters your belief system about the origin of life, or you could have an experience that shatters your understanding of what you're here for.
Yeah.
Because both of those are it's like an ocean and then a lake, and they're connected. And so you can trace back and forth between them through the water system of your own understanding of why you're here. But they're absolutely connected, and they're absolutely going to inform you.
So just given what you've said so far, and I mean, also because I know you, but I'll just like highlight for the listener, it doesn't seem like you consider you have a very flat or horizontal understanding of purpose. It doesn't seem to me that you would define yourself as someone who understands everything and considers that everything is material. But I'm curious if you identify with that at some point in your life and what your understanding personally of purpose was at that point in your life.
So my own development, if I trace it back from, I can remember being a child and having sort of magical experience of life, just sort of everything is somehow magical and it all is mysterious, but it's infused with some sense of possibility, and that's that childhood innocence that then I remember collapsing into in my adolescence. It was more like, okay, things weren't that meaningful. They're actually all these religious fundamentalists that I might be surrounded by are deluded. And maybe at that point I calibrated more at a rational level of understanding where at least what I can see and touch and run the numbers on is real. And my experience of purpose at that point was just kind of like, it's just a choice, some take the available options and then go with them. And I, at the same time, also, I was interested in mysterious things like yoga or martial arts or meditation. And those started to awaken me to things I was just innately in love with or passionate about. So my love of music came online when I was in my, teens, early to mid-teens. And that was accompanied by this interest in meditation and in martial arts and in yoga. And sort of like those implied a verticality or a transformational journey to become more aware and more aware of lots of things, not just more aware of myself or my breath or my body, but more aware of what's going on, my relationship with others, my relationship with truth, all these kinds of things. And so I had an experience of correlating whatever I understood as my purpose with whatever I understood as life. From life is magical as a little kid to a very concrete, there is no reason to even search for these answers because these questions can't be asked and answered well because you don't know, because everything is just atoms and interactions and math, out to a quest that it contacted me with higher transformational experiences from meditation and martial arts and so forth, all the way to the present day where I'm very much still trying to figure things out, or I'm still wanting to learn more, understand more. But I definitely have a sense that I'm in touch with a possible reason why I'm here that's connected to a much larger, hopeful reason why humanity's here or why life itself is here.
Yeah. And of course, I want to ask more about that, but I feel that's a little bit intimate. Maybe we'll get there. So maybe we'll go back a little bit and think about let's just start with your journey. I asked about the barriers that maybe got in the way. And the first answer you give is just, it's an important kind of substructure or framework. If you don't have a cosmology or belief system that allows for purpose, that's a pretty big barrier to feeling a sense of purpose in your life. You also talked about different layers of meaning. Is there something more in that? Like, are there other sources of meaning that you feel like kind of people get to and then stop at, where it's short of purpose?
Well, I don't know that I would go with the word meaning. Let's start with the word energy. And I don't mean it in the foo-foo way. I mean in literally how much current capacity you have, how much energy you have when you wake up, right? So this drive, this desire. So another thing that blocks people from purpose or from experiencing is whatever might also block them from feeling alive, right? So if I'm depressed, I'm sort of collapsing in on myself. I'm sort of heavy. I'm maybe focused on sets of thoughts that are right in front of me that I'm almost like sometimes identified with and sometimes just trying to peel off myself from, like almost like a glue trap. And that's going to make purpose very hard to contact because I've got this heaviness and this low energy state. Whereas if I am getting more and more powerful in my body and in my mind and in my emotions, that's going to allow me to journey farther. And we understand that physically. I might be able to go on longer walks or runs, but it also applies emotionally and intellectually. I'm going to be more daring with the way I use my mind and my heart. Right? And so a lot of folks find themselves, low dietary, just like not healthy diets, not a lot of movement, not a lot of intellectual movement, not a great intellectual diet. Maybe if you're only paying attention to the echo chamber of whatever's going on in social media or something, it's easy to just fall into a low energy state. And I mean that literally in how you feel. And if we think about life as this urge to overcome and this urge to survive and this urge to thrive and this urge to reproduce, it's a very powerful energy. It's a very intentional energy. I want to live, and purpose, your sense of purpose will be different if your experience of aliveness is lower or higher. So that's another one. The more energy you have on board and you're in all the levels, your body, so just how healthy you feel, how strong you are, how much endurance and stamina you have, all the way to your emotions, your capacity to feel and to feel fully and to let feelings move, not be frozen, as well as your mind, to be curious, to be interested, to actually have interests and to pursue them, to be assimilating higher and more complex ideas and onward. That amount of energy is also going to influence your experience or lack thereof of, quote, purpose.
Mm-hmm. So maybe it's something like if we use, Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs, if you have a certain level of energy, you have energy to handle like certain levels of those pyramids. So their survival level, and it might take more energy to get to like really having excess energy to devote into creativity or devote into relationships. And maybe it takes the most energy to devote to like having the interest in and the potential to have self-actualization. Do you see those things corresponding?
I think they can. I don't think they have to. I think there's people who could be in very dire situations that just have an innate onboard battery that's supercharged and they're going to do whatever it takes to survive. But still, there's definitely, if you think of the Maslow's pyramid as an energy invitation, so that the energy is going higher, that you're actually like getting more energetic. You have the classic like couch potato. That's a low energy state. There's not a lot of expression. It's not a lot of extra surplus. It's kind of like you hit the end of the day or middle of the afternoon, as it were, and you plop down, right? Yeah. And versus someone who's actually seeking, who's trying to learn things, who's trying to grow, who's doing hard things. That's a person who's more likely to be on fire with a reason to do those things. And the more powerful the reason, the more the energy will be available to do harder things that are more interesting to that person. And so that would be coinciding with someone moving up the self-actualization pyramid. So, the question you started with was what blocks people from purpose? I would posit there's actually a number of things. The first one, and one of the most important, which is one of the hardest, it's sort of like the water you're swimming in as a fish or the air you breathe that you don't realize, is just the box you live in as far as your belief structure. But another big one is just how much available energy is in your system. And I mean that on a health level, but also on a curiosity level for mental energy, capacity and interest to learn things. And I mentioned, emotional energy and so forth. So those are two big ones. Cosmology is hard to do something about quickly. It takes time to rethink your understanding and to actually seek out experiences that can shift you, right? Whereas the energy one is something everyone can do something about in this moment if they want to. They can choose to eat the salad. They can choose to do the exercise, go for a walk. They can choose to read the book versus just bounce around in Reddit or something like that. That makes sense?
Yeah, totally. Okay. So let's say, I like how you've laid this out so far. Let's say that we've overcome those, like my belief structure allows for me to have purpose, it entertains it as a possibility. I have enough energy where I can devote time and attention to that. What else might get in my way at that point? What's the next troll that I see along the road?
Yeah, one thing to say within the whole energy universe, I would say that any blockages, illnesses, or harms, or wounds, those are things that can also put up barriers or put up obstacles to the purpose quest. And so that would be another thing to look at. Say that I'm doing consciously as best as I can, but what happens if I'm carrying a set of traumas in my mind that tell me? So in my experience, I came from a not musical family. Okay, so we aren't musical. That was a belief that was bouncing around the halls of my house, and it took a lot of effort. I had one person in my family, my entire family, who actually said anything positive about my wanting to play guitar when I started when I was 15. And so now I'm many years after that, and I've played easily 20,000 hours of guitar. Not that you would know it if you heard me playing, but I have anyway. So I was around a lot of messages that we aren't musical. And so that would be sort of a blend of, if I had taken that internal and I believed it and I hadn't examined it, that might be influencing me. So we also have these sort of experiences we can pick up that are just traumas or, unconscious just acceptance of how things are for our own personal experience that might also influence someone's ability to lean in. So let's say that music had something pivotal to play in my experience of purpose, but I had, instead of listening to my grandfather, I'd listened to everyone else in my family, which is like, we're not musical. I might have cut myself off for a very long time from a major avenue of my experience of purposeful forward movement, right? So there's like a shadow trauma healing process that can also cause people not to be in conversation with what their experience of meaningful purpose might be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I see that with people I work with a lot around money, like beliefs, that are kind of passed down or inherited from parents or family that either say you have to focus on money and can't focus on anything else, or that money is a bad thing, like whatever it is, that come in all different ways, but it can really constrain people's creativity related to like how they express themselves in life.
So this idea of this frame of cosmology, like, so what do you define as how things are? Why is life here? Why are you here? But this is another domain. It's connected to that, but it's really more localized.
Yeah.
And it's your individualized experience. Where is it being warped? Where is it being twisted and sort of constricted? That relates to this energy experience. I'm energized. I'm alive. I'm hungry. I want to live. I want to stand. I want to breathe deep. I want to drink of life, which is going to be more likely to lead you to more uniqueness and more meaningful experience that will express itself as your purpose. And so this side of the wounding and the trauma and so forth is another big one. And if you aren't aware that it's operating, so being unconscious of this, that's the worst one, because you just think this is how it is. You didn't realize that those people were telling you things that weren't true. They were just opinions. There's other options. And you don't know you can do something about it other than just be smashed under it. So that's another big one, is how do you engage your own growth process, and how do you engage where your growth is inhibited due to outside factors, internal beliefs, whatever. How do you work your own healing process or your own wholeness process?
Yeah, it's one of those things, like you said earlier with our beliefs. If we're swimming in that water, it's difficult to identify kind of what the clarity of the water should be. So we have to know that there's something messed up about the whole relation to music, for example, and then we have to actually work on it once we've identified it. And both of those steps are challenging potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but let's say we did that. Let's say we're you and we did that. We got through the belief thing around music, and we accepted that we could play music if we wanted to. What's the next block?
Okay, so another big one that I think blocks people is so the most interesting experiences in life are often far from where you start, and they require you to actually be consistent all the way to that distant location before you start to experience the benefits or the flowering of what's possible. You can't know what it's like to look off of a mountain peak until you actually see the mountain from afar, decide to go to its base, and then walk all the way up to the top through all the challenges that are involved. So actually, it's almost like there's a structural element. So if you're a human being who's optimized for the short term or for pleasure more than pain, you are almost like you are standing at the precipice of a massive, cliff, and there's a huge opening, and you're blocked from all kinds of experiences because you're not willing to like go all the way down and on the ground across and back up the other side. That it's literally just stopping you in your tracks. And it's part of purposeful, in my experience, like the expressions of purpose that are most interesting arise after long periods of time and a lot of delayed gratification and discipline and consistency and follow through and discovery. So you feel like you're lost a lot of the time, but you just have a hunch. This is what you're supposed to do. So you keep doing it. So if you are optimized structurally for short-term, easy, and only what you can see very close by, you're going to miss out. So it's almost like there's a faith or a second set of eyes that you see with, this inner vision that you're able to see way past what's in front of your literal physical eyes right now. And so just not getting that that's structurally how things work on this planet, falling for what's in front of you, falling for the, what seems so boring or just every day, and not realizing there are these possibilities that you could discover if only you went on the greatest journey you could go on for your personal evolution. I think that's another big one. So people don't allow themselves to actually like get going on a grand quest out of which their purpose emerges completely undeniable.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, and why would that be? Like if I had an intuitive understanding that quest was going to pay off. So if I had that faith, like, okay, I can see the other cliff edge there. I know I have to go down into the canyon, come back up. If I can see it and it looks good, then I'm willing to do it. I mean, if I saw it and it didn't look good to me, then I'd be silly to do it anyways, right? Then it would just be a waste of effort. So what would allow me to be able to see that?
Well, so let's say you've resolved some inner blocks, you've gotten some of that trauma and so forth out of the way. And so you're starting to get more in touch with what you naturally are interested in or you're naturally drawn to. So someone who's told, okay, I'm just going to keep using myself as a nominal example.
Yeah.
So
it's
we
great,
aren't a music.
because you know that guy pretty well.
Yeah. So, well, I would wish I did. Maybe I don't. But we're not a musical family. So that's what everyone except my grandfather, that's what I heard. Okay, great. So there was something that was drawing me to, I loved music. I was touched by it and I wanted to experience what it was like to make it, despite a lot of messages saying that was not a great thing to do, not a valid way to spend my time, et cetera. So let's say I overcome some of that sort of warping and wounding and I decide, no, this is really what I want. So then becomes my own maturity and ability to tolerate short-term or medium-term frustrations and pains and difficulties with very little payoff. And so a lot of educational processes, a lot of mentorship processes are trying to support people to externalize the faith and belief in themselves so that they can get going with someone, but like kind of nudging them forward so they can get there to the place where there starts to be a positive feedback loop. So they can then go on from their own. So some people just lack that type of belief in themselves from outside. They don't get that mentor. They don't have that teacher. They don't have that social support. Other people never overcome the warpage and the wounding. So they aren't able to like heed the inner voice or listen to that weird desire or inclination that comes up. And then just generally, in the world, if you look around, it's like basically things will be a mess. Like being clean, being precise, it's like weeds take the garden if you just like let it do its thing. And so, and definitely in what counts as like modern society, it's not like people really care, embark on a grand journey to realize unseen potentials that are only going to come to you if you stick with the, path for 10 years or more through thick and thin, right? So there's not a lot of reinforcement for most people in most places, for most things that people are drawn to as like their deepest calling, right? And this is a structural challenge that gets a lot of people. That it's unfortunately, we right now have a society where it's rare for people to come through, from age 10 to 30. It's rare for people to come through that with a continuity of ever deepening exploration in the direction of something that's authentic to them, that's wanting to come out in service to all.
I really, the part about the positive feedback loop, I think that's really, really graspable. I'm wondering if you could explain that a little bit more, your conception of it, and maybe I'd love to hear in your life, like with this music example, when that took hold for you.
So first off, like when we're talking about purpose, we're trying to say there's possibilities that exist out there that are sufficient for an entire human life's focus and follow through.
It's worth restating that point. Yeah, it's pretty deep.
So a human being, focusing a large amount, if not, the majority of their time and energy on a single thing for, decades, that there are things that you can do that with that still aren't exhausted, that they continue to go and unfold and expand and deepen is very amazing. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about purpose, is that possibility. And for that to be something that flows authentically from someone where they genuinely feel this is why they're here. And it provides an incredible amount of meaning and an experience of themselves as their true, like this is as much of myself as I could possibly be. So I'm not living out a script someone else wrote for me. I'm not just stumbling into things randomly. I'm actually choosing and I'm crafting and I'm almost the grand artist of my life, heading in a direction that feels profoundly personal and meaningful and miraculous. That's the possibility.
Yeah. And that it seems that proposition, whatever it is for you or me or any person, it would have to be just like infinitely difficult to remain, or not difficult is the right word, but just like fundamentally unattainable for it to continue to be interesting and inexhaustible throughout the course of a decade, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly. So even getting started is already a very courageous choice, usually brought on by the, ignorance, the beginner's mind. I feel like this is why it's such a useful idea, because the beginner is just super excited. Things amazing. Like I remember being a guitarist and playing an A minor chord, which is a very easy chord. And that alone, just that sound was just spellbinding. Just listening, boing, and that it all rang and that all my fingers did the right thing and the sound was there and what it was just captivated me. Whereas today, if I play an A minor chord, I might even not notice. I mean, it's like, it's an A minor chord. Who cares? It's nothing relevant or noteworthy about an A minor chord unless it's as part of something more interesting. So that beginner's mind is one of these gifts that itself is a positive feedback loop. The problem is that with a human being embedded in a society, embedded in a cosmology, embedded in all their woundings and all their hopes and dreams and everything, is that a sufficient feedback loop to keep them going? And for how long? And what other feedback loops need to start coming in to help them stay in motion toward that seemingly inexhaustible but well worth it pursuit of their lifetime, right? What we're calling purpose here. So I think attention to these kinds of positive feedback loops and cultivation of them. So if you're a teacher or if you're a parent or someone trying to help human beings to access themselves at higher and higher levels, figuring out as many of these as possible and encouraging them is wise, right? And the number of stories I've heard from people in the musical realm talking about, I played, the recorder in second grade and the teacher just like took it away from me. Like, never mind, these kinds of things. Like that's an experience that could last a lifetime, that could rob some potential musician of their relationship to music forever, practically, right? And so the beginner's mind is a positive feedback loop. You actually don't know what you don't know, thank God, because the mountain is so big and you're just barely at the beginning. And so you enjoy all the little details of this fresh aliveness of just the simplicity, the simplest little achievement, right? Having a mentor, having teachers, having compatriots who are also in it with you and supporting, or, some friendly competition and so forth, all of that can help. Ultimately, I think the reason purpose is an important thing to talk about, despite the fact that lots of people say purpose is bullshit, doesn't exist, and it's just whatever, just choose it and it doesn't matter. And my point of view is always that purpose does and doesn't exist, that we can choose it, but it also is there to be discovered, that it's paradoxical. There's a paradox in purpose that no one can erase. So no one who's coming and trying to argue about purpose and say it doesn't exist or that's ridiculous. It's like there's still these weird paradoxes of, but why, do certain people discover and pursue things against all odds and through thick and thin and come and achieve heights that we all admire, whether it's a great artist or, a great business person or what have you, a great human, spiritual leaders, all these, these achievements come through usually a lot of hardship and a lot of things they could have done that were much easier than what they ended up doing. As far as positive feedback loops go, ultimately, I think the one that allows someone to continue is that experience of directly being in motion on that particular journey that is just mine, that I know I'm supposed to do. And I don't always know why or where or how, but I just have this deep, deep sense. And so ultimately, that's why purpose matters, is because it lets you not need beginner's mind or that amazing mentor or society showering you with accolades. What you need, all you need, is yourself and your inner knowing and your inner connection to this felt and experienced sense that I'm on the right track and this is worth it. And what's next? What else can I learn? What else can I do? How far does it go? What can I do to get there in the best way I can? Because I want to find out. I want to find out what happened.
Okay. So I want to take that and concretize it with the story of this kid learning guitar. So plays A minor. He's like, wow, how sweet this A minor music. And then you're taking this whole precipice thing where you're like on this cliff, you see this other one, you got to go down and up to get there. It's difficult. Like at that point, my guess, correct me if I'm wrong, is not that like, you're like, oh, I'm going to play for 30 years and end up in Carnegie Hall. It's more like, oh, I wonder what that F that has that weird bar thing, that sounds like it's going to be hard, but I wonder what that sounds like. Is it something like that where the precipice is not so enormous, but it's just kind of the next level?
Yeah. So it's like, oh, cool. I can go from A minor to C. And now I want to learn a song.
Oh, song.
And now I want to learn two songs. And now, oh man, for this song, I need that F chord. And now I want to be able to do that thing I heard that thing, that band play on the radio. And now I want to be able to play with my friend. And he took lessons from some teacher. So maybe I should take lessons because I don't know what he's even doing. And so, it starts like that in youth. Like one of the reasons we want kids to have lots of experiences is so that they can figure out and come into contact with what's uniquely native to their own, just inclination, right? Unfortunately, in education, right? Like the Latin root of the word is to pull out, right? Ductility, to take ductility out, to move it out. And so you're pulling something out. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people have the experience of the educational system where it's trying to stamp out rather than pull out.
Yeah.
But yeah, imagine that kid, their initial interest is almost just like a little spark where you try to light a fire, right? And you have a little bit of kindling and you're using your breath and you're trying to just get the first little bitty sparks going. And then maybe this tiniest little fire. And then slowly, in one understanding of purpose where you can look back and notice the through line that's been uniting your experiences. So the good news is no matter what age someone is, no matter how many blocks they've received, you have the opportunity of looking backward and noticing this through line of your life. And usually someone can find evidence of this life force trying to emerge and refusing to be held down. So in the child learning the guitar, there's some interest, there's some draw, and then a chord, and then another chord, and then a song, and then maybe another song, and then a friend, and the guitar lessons that they are taking, you take, and you keep going. And so you start to build some momentum. The child starts to build some momentum. They start to be able to play guitar. But there's lots of people who can play 3 chords or 10 chords on a guitar. And there's very, very few of the guitar, right? So at some point where the most rare type of expression might come from, and again, there's no one way this happens and there's no one way to explain it. But if a child had enough of a reason, had enough different linked reasons for their experience of life and what they want to do, they might decide to devote as much of themselves as possible to that musical process just to see where it leads, right? And so there's usually like a starting slow and then building and then building and then building. Most people don't let themselves have that experience. So for example, all the people in my family decided we aren't musical, didn't have that experience. And only I was like, I think I really do want to learn to play the guitar. And let me stick through thick and thin, even though for probably 10 years, it wasn't like, I wasn't raised to be a musician. I wasn't, it was still something I was stumbling on. In the beginning, you're not very good. You're doing it for fun anyway. So the idea of doing it professionally is not even a question. And it just kind of, you keep going and seeing where it leads. And for me, ultimately, like music was a spiritual path as much as it was a artistic path, right? It was a path of awakening and awareness and just discovering what's possible. Almost like why people climb mountains. They just want to see what happens, right? But it took like 10 years to get to that point for me of like very roundabout back and forth and through the shadows and the light and back into the, undergrowth and then back out. It was not a straight line.
Wait, so it's 10 years before you made this kind of, I'm imagining some kind of like bloodletting ceremony where you and the guitar like slit your wrists and like rub them together. Like 10 years before that, where you're like, hey, I'm going to do this thing?
It was probably 7 or 8 before I really was honest with myself that I wanted to achieve mastery. So I started when I was 15 and it was probably 22, 23, where I finally admitted to myself, I really love this and I want to pursue it as far as it goes.
Okay. So in our schema here, there's been like many iterations of this positive feedback loop, or of you standing on this precipice and looking at this higher one, doing some amount of hard work, achieving it, feeling good about it, and then redoing that before you get on this kind of like really ballsy precipice where you're like, you can see like way up there and you're like, I want to master this unmasterable thing. And I'm going to dedicate, I don't know if you knew it would be years or decades or your whole life or what you thought it would be at that point, but some sort of massive commitment.
I certainly thought it'd be less time than it's taken. That's for sure. Yes.
And now how long do you think it's going to be? 25 years or more?
Well, it's interesting because any kind of purpose process, once you have enough momentum, actually things start moving faster. That's part of the fun. So now I don't know. I mean, I think I have a different relationship to it. Pretty much every year I can take a huge leap because I know it's just a matter of focus, discipline, follow through, attention, getting mentors, all that stuff. And I have all that lined up. This is also, it's probably a block, the advantage that accrues, the compound advantage that accumulates. It's, if you don't let yourself get in motion, going back to what blocks people from purpose, can't tolerate those first 7 to 8 years in my experience of when I didn't know what I was doing and I was just winging a prayer, hoping maybe, possibly, before I would finally listen to this inner, true, deep longing of like, this is the level of my seriousness and aspiration for this instrument and music itself and so forth. So that first 7 years, there is very little compounding. There's very little accumulation of advantage. It's so much trial and error, unless you're lucky and you have just the best mentors, which I did not, really. And so, but at this point, I do have the best mentors. So now it's like every year gets to be an experience of accumulating compounding and my own, ability to get out of time practicing more and the more you understand of a certain field, you get more insights. So from where I'm at, I'm happy to say that I don't think it feels like it takes forever in the way that it did. Looking back, definitely from like when I started for the first 20 years was very much slower than maybe the last 8.
Yeah. Okay. Now, and I'm like fully distracted from the original purpose thing and just fully interested in this guitar thing, but I think it's worthwhile. So I'm curious as to what you've learned over the decades through this practice of dedication to the guitar that is not related to the guitar. And maybe as an entry point to that, you recently completed a challenge, a 1,000-day challenge that I'll let you detail. And so maybe we can start with there. Like, what did you learn besides what you learned on the guitar from this 1,000-day challenge?
Yeah. So 1,000-day challenge is the resolution to do something 1,000 days in a row without missing a day. It was presented to me by a health coach probably 8 years ago as part of his program, his recommendation for how to apply parts of his program to get the maximum benefit. So I had done a couple other 1,000-day challenges that were much simpler and easier. But this time I decided I wanted to see what it was like to, if I could, practice 1 hour minimum of guitar every single day for 1,000 days. So no days off and at least an hour. So an hour minimum per day. And most days it was much more than that. But in addition to all of the actual concrete guitar learning, the first thing I learned is that it's actually a miracle if you're able to do something an hour a day with that much control of your schedule. That was the biggest takeaway, was just humility that my life cooperated to that degree, that I had no major health issues, no major accidents, no major family emergencies, no major geopolitical crises, no major earthquakes and floods and tornadoes. Just a tornado hitting my house could have blown the 1,000-day challenge out of the water, right? So this humility that everything conspired around me to support this, that was a big one. And then I think aiming to do things for 1,000 days, first off, it just reorients you around time because you get to experience being a beginner looking up at a tall mountain again, because 1,000 days is still 1,000 days. And I was on day 1, once upon a time, 1,000 days ago, basically, right? And so you get to recapitulate the entire journey we just discussed in miniature. And so all of the same, like in the beginning, it's fun. And then, the first 10 days are really cool. And then day 11 to 20 is like, oh God, what have I got myself into? And then some days are just like, I'm doing it to do it. And other days, you can't believe how lucky you are that you get another day 247. Oh my gosh. And it kind of also creates a through line across a period of my life. That was really cool. So it happened, 3 years and change ago. It started. And so those 3 years and change, 3 years and a half or so, are all connected by this one intention. So I have lots of memories that are part of this 1,000-day cycle. And so it created a different way of remembering and watching my life over the last 3 years. I had a lot of beautiful times and beautiful experiences. And, one experience was in the pandemic, I did a road trip to the West Coast. And so I remember practicing in St. Louis, where I stopped, and then in Sioux City, where I stopped, and then in Bozeman, where I stopped to get my hour in while driving otherwise 10 hours a day or whatever. So a lot of interesting experiences like that, where I get to have that memory of honoring the commitment inside all the different things that happened. So yeah, 1,000-day challenge, I think for the purposes of this conversation, it's cool because it recapitulates everything we just were talking about, of the journey of finding one's purpose and living it out. And also, I just think in general, it's probably good. I think in terms of common versus rare qualities, and being short-term distractible is way more common than being long-term patient. And a 1,000-day challenge is a great way to flex and exercise the muscle of patience.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Okay. And you mentioned the guitar for you is not just a creative practice, but a spiritual practice. And it reminds me of a line I read in a book yesterday. I was flying to Europe and reading this book by our mutual friend, Uncle Jamal. And he starts the book with an anecdote about a 9th century Sufi sage. I think his name was Bayami or something like that. And this guy wants to go talk to the master, and the guy finds him, goes to his town, knocks on the door, and he's like, hey, I'm looking for Bayami. And the guy, Bayami, who answers the door is like, oh, to be honest with you, I've been looking for him for the last 30 years as well. And so he's like still in this process of self-discovery, even though he's acknowledged as a sage. And the conclusion from Bayami and from Uncle Jamal, the author of this book, is that that's what we're here to do. We're in this process of self-discovery, of trying to understand what Jamal calls the divine mystery, but Socrates refers us to just knowing ourselves in ever deeper ways. What is this practice with the guitar done for you with that in mind?
Well, everything we started talking about, which was sort of this understanding of blockages of purpose, I've confirmed every single one of those things in my own laboratory, which is this guitar journey. So the main thing the guitar has given me is a concrete, physical, real laboratory to test virtually any teaching or idea about philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and definitely, of course, music, creativity, many, many, many different types of endeavors. I can always just go and reference. I would say, in a sense, the guitar as a vehicle of music. So it's like the guitar is a smaller infinity of, it's still infinite, but it's a smaller infinity of the infinity of music, which is a smaller infinity of like everything, right? But music is very vast, inexhaustibly vast. And then the guitar as an instrument that I think in particular it's obvious on the guitar because the guitar takes so many forms and is so many places doing so many things in human hands that it's my primary teacher of reality, So every quality that I value, the guitar had a say in. It had some perspective on that I got to interact with, And so for me, I'm very lucky because it gave me a concrete place to confirm or deny any idea or recommendation. So for example, that story you just taught or you just shared that Uncle Jamal, like I'm very good at not just taking anything as, oh yeah, well, of course, because the story is automatically true. But at the same time, I'm not hopelessly skeptical where nothing ever means anything. I just make sure that I go and cross-reference with my own experience in the chair practicing guitar day to day, And so it has become a vehicle for me of so many things and primarily just a meaning and meaningfulness, And music is beautiful for a lot of reasons, but it has so much to do with time and with impermanence and with feeling. It's got math in it, but it also has emotion in it. And this is, in studying classical music, there's so much of flexibility to time. It's not like these grid systems like modern pop or something where everything is just classical music. There's a lot of breathing in time. You slow down, you speed up. And so that relationship to time, in particular from classical music, from classical guitar, has taught me an incredible amount. It's hard to, I can't possibly summarize it all, right? But imagine if you had a place to go to confirm anything important in your life, relationship, ideas, your own personal sense of what's going on, all that stuff. So for me, that's what the guitar has been.
Wow. It's beautiful. So it's a love story. Okay. So going back to the different blocks that we've identified so far, now we're at the point where you've made this incredible commitment. And so for someone who's made that commitment, who's had enough of the positive feedback, we see the joy, they're like, all right, I'm going to make this commitment. Then what could possibly block?
I think that the only way you're going to make that commitment is because you think that it's worth it.
Yeah. You feel it. It's not even just like a thought. It's like you've kind of had this experience.
You know it's worth it. So at that point, the blocks are just, you can't help if fate itself conspires to strike you down or take you out. Like I was always aware, like what if I lost my hearing or my hands?
Yeah.
And this is a frustrating element of being fully devoted to something like the guitar. But other than those things, as long as you can maintain connection with that flame, with that clear sense of this is something I want to do, losing connection to that is the only real danger.
Okay. So all of the stuff that happens in the external, the individual external realm of productivity, concentration, consistency, focus, being organized, you're saying all of that is just, if you maintain that interconnection, all that comes with it.
All that evolves with it. right? So you can be inefficient and unproductive and confused and waste a lot of time. But if you stay continually trying to figure it out, you'll probably eventually get better at being more efficient, more productive, and, get more out of every minute that you devote to whatever pursuit. So really the main thing is being in connection with your deepest why, your deepest, highest reason in what you're trying to accomplish and why it's worth it. And then the rest is really just follow through.
Yeah.
And staying in connection with that.
Beautiful. Okay. And I think that really captures the main arc I wanted to get to today. So thank you for that. There's many other things we can talk about, but I just want to have this, let's say out loud, this intention to have you on more often because we work together, big part of each other's lives. I have like many conversations with you each week that I'd like to share on this podcast. We obviously don't, but I would like to have you on more often. But before we adjourn, I wonder, just because we're here publicly, it's a chance for you to make a public commitment. It's not like on the blockchain or anything, but hopefully it'll be around for a while. Do you see any public manifestation of this study of guitar for you? Are we we're going to see you around? Or is it mostly like an internal practice for you that only you will really know about and benefit from?
I share it. So one of my most formative experiences as a musician was volunteering for 2 years at a hospice in Nashville. And every Tuesday I would go to this hospice, a live hospice downtown, and I would walk. It's basically a loop. So I'd walk from one direction or the other, and I would go to every room that was open and check in. Some days I would play for the couple where the wife had Alzheimer's and they'd been married for 46 years, and she was in long-term hospice because she had Alzheimer's and she needed round-the-clock care. Other times I would talk to someone who was going to die that day or was dying right then. So I had a broad spectrum of experiences. And at that time, I really understood one of the most important things I've ever learned about music, which is that the currency of music is attention. Okay. So the quality of the attention present, the music can rise to that. So if I'm in a bar in the corner, so Nashville, when you arrive at the airport in Nashville, there are bars in the airport where there's just a guitarist playing to like a bunch of people who are on the move, getting a beer and a burger. Maybe they just landed and they're just going to their hotel, but they want to get something to eat, or maybe they're on the way out and they're just, in vacation mode, or all points in between. And I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in being the one singing, the singer-songwriter at the bar in the Nashville airport. Nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of different types of music, musicians doing a lot of different types of music. That's wonderful. But for me, I really imprinted on this, what it's like when someone's dying. In that last moment of their life, that's a very unique quality of attention. And I had some really powerful experiences. People who were ready, people who were not ready, people who were at peace, people who were pissed. I had a lot of experiences. So it's not just one kind of attention that's present in that last period of someone's life, but all of those different experiences were united in this very raw, very present, just like for those people, these were the final moments of their life. And they were present, trying to squeeze them out as much as they could, whether they were pissed about it or they were grateful about it. Right. So I do share music, and I share in places where that's the quality is present that I'm looking for, and I'll continue to do so, and we'll see where that leads me. That's my answer.
Thanks, Matt. That was awesome. That concludes another episode of the 10,000 Heroes podcast. Your hosts are Ankur Shahjalite and Nathan Ramos. Let's roll out of here with some gratitude. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you to our guest. Thanks to Pierre for the awesome show artwork. And thanks to DJ Plainview for the theme music. Thank you to our audio editor and producer, Martin. And to everybody out there, if you like the show and you want to support our mission, support our growth, there's two things you can do. There's many things, but let's start with two. The main one is to reach out and let us know how the show has contributed to your life and how our show could contribute to your life even further. Do you get what we're trying to do? And I want to know. And once you've done that, the next best thing is to share the episodes that have touched you with people who they will also touch. It's that simple. Share the love and take good care.